Hi everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yee.
I'm Camilla.
And today we're taking a look at Dutch Resistance Orange Shall Overcome. This is a game that was, this is from a first-time publisher, Liberation Games. And Marcel, the designer here, someone I got to meet at Essen, is very excited because I really like this theme.
Yes.
Wartime, historical, but not necessarily war game. It's like one of my favorite settings for a game.
Right, you're playing as the Resistance. And I love that. It's that. It just feels, I mean, not to spoil the review here, but it feels very cooperative in that nature, that you are the Resistance fighting. I like that a lot.
Exactly. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this game works, and then we'll come back and give you our thoughts. Here's the game set up on the table. You can see this is the central board here representing the city that we are moving around trying to perform the different actions to complete the objectives. And this here is an individual player board, which gives you a nice overview of the round structure and the actions that you'll be performing, as well as keeping track of the different information you need for your own character. So each player will have one of these, as well as an asymmetric player power and some action cards that are going to be unique to them. The scenario is going to be chosen by the players, scenarios 1 through 5 in here of increasing difficulty, not necessarily campaign, but you can play any of them. The back side is going to show this setup of the locations, anything important, how many occupation soldiers and officers are going to be on the board, and where to do just the basic setup stuff. On the front is going to show you scenario-specific actions that you might need to take, whether you are starting the resistance or whether you're trying to save various students, sneak items across, or outright defy the German occupation. Also important in front is going to be what the goal of the scenario is and loss conditions. Generally speaking, the shared loss conditions are going to be if the morale of the resistance drops to 0, if the alibi of any individual character runs to 0, or if you run out of time, the occupier cards here being a timer for the game. So what does the game structure look like? At the start of the game, you're going to receive bonus action points here depending on how high your morale is. Each player will draw their 3 action cards, and everyone will also draw 1 occupier card, which goes into your hand. At this point, starting with the first player, players will play out action cards for action points or for the special abilities, or in this case, an action point and a unique special ability, unique to that particular character that you're playing. And then after resolving those 3, they will have to resolve the occupier card that is also in their hand. So each player will have the liberty to discuss and plan out what they want to do cooperatively, but knowing this bit of information here that they cannot share with the other players. After they have done their actions and chosen to use any of these bonus actions over here on the morale track, they will then have to resolve their occupier card, which will have negative effects, lowering the safety of locations. If a location is dropped to 0, you might have to trigger a raid, which is going to affect the health and the well-being of all of the players. They might also lose morale and they might lose alibi by taking actions, but they're also going to be gathering the resources needed to complete whatever the objectives are. In this first scenario setup here, for example, running to these locations to gather resources, you can use those to pay for these costs here to make all of the action spaces available, and when all of them are available, you'll win the game. So that's one, for example, but there are different scenarios, so I won't go into the specifics of each of those. Players are going to be running around, moving through spaces, activating the locations they are at, gaining different types of resource tokens that they will spend for different effects, mostly to pay for whatever the scenario-specific requirements are going to be. They can roll dice to shore up the safety of locations that they are at. They can spend tokens to re-roll so that the safety can go up higher, and they're trying to avoid any interactions with the guards, the occupiers. But if a player does move on their turn, they will have to draw a halt card. Another player will read the story and give them 2 options that they will choose between. You encounter a child who is scared and running away from occupier police. You can hide them or you can give him up to the police to save your own skin. How do you react to this situation? And based on what you chose and who the occupying forces are, you'll have a different result. That'll affect your morale, your ability to perform different actions, so on and so forth. So players will take these actions, movement, trying to gather resources, spending tokens or spending reroll actions to try to move up the safety and gain alibi, to get cards that will give them the ability to sneak past occupation guards without having to encounter them, or maybe gaining tickets that allow them to move further across the map but have a secret negative side effect because you are raising suspicion by trying to transport around the city quickly. After all players have gone and resolved their action cards and their occupier card in hand, you'll enter the night phase, in which, based on how many resources you are carrying, you're going to lower the safety of the locations where you are at. Depending on how low your alibi is, you might have to lower the safety even further, possibly triggering these raids. Then you will resolve the patrol card. The top patrol card will show what color patrols are going to activate during the nighttime. So you see here in the green region, any occupying forces who are on green roadways will move. We know this from the beginning of the round, and now at the end of the round we flip over this card, which will have some negative effects, loss of morale, possibly or causing places to lose safety, and then they will move occupiers in those areas either on the black or the white signposts. As they move through these areas, they will lower the safety. And if players are found in those locations, they will have to then also lower their alibi. So, completing the objective before time runs out or before morale or alibi is lost is the point of the game. And so while that is not all of the rules, that does give you a good idea of how to play Dutch Resistance Orange Shall Overcome. So from a first-time publisher, first-time designer, just from the get-go, you see this all set up on the table, and you kind of learn the history and stuff behind it. It's to me, just first off, right out the gate, very impressive.
Yes, that's the exact word I was going to go to, is just impressive. And I think from everything, I'm a big fan of the thematic integration. Of a game. This is one that it is not a pasted on theme. You see the theme, you can't help but see the history behind it. But yet the mechanisms behind the gameplay fit that theme so well that it's not a dumb theme game, for like, you know what I mean? Like, sure. Well, I guess that's there. No, at no point are you like, that mechanism has to be there because of the theme, but it doesn't make sense. Nor does the theme melt away and you just play a Euro mechanism soup kind of game either. It's a great integration of the two and really, really impressive, I think, with what he has been able to accomplish in his first design with that.
I agree. So I would say my biggest critique of the production of this is that sometimes the art is a little inconsistent, where you have a few pieces of art that look really good, and you have a few that kind of seem squished in, and there's little things like that. But otherwise, I love the look of it on the table. I love the fact that the theme, the history of this is a direct driver to the game being made.
Right.
You read a little bit of the opening of the rulebook, and it basically says, like, this is not a game that I made mechanisms first. You can tell, like, Marcel has family that are in this game.
Yeah.
Like his, not descendants, the opposite of that. His
ancestors?
Ancestors, thank you. He has family, his ancestors that are the characters in this game.
Yeah. That's
how personal it is. And you can feel that as you're going through and reading the back of the biographies of the characters and reading through the history provided in the rulebook.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I had down, is that the characters feel personal. That comes through so clearly. As you're asymmetric, but it doesn't feel like you're playing the mechanism of asymmetry. You're asymmetric because you are your individual person, and those cards tie into that personality. After my first game, I didn't realize that the biographies of the characters were on the back until after my first game, and I read it and I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. So at my next one, I read that first, and it just, the cards just kind of explain themselves. The game almost just plays itself, and that, I mean, the theme just kind of plays itself and comes through itself in that. I really like it. Artistically, it's not one that I love. It's not really my art style. But as soon as you get in and get into that theme, it makes sense. It's so very fitting for this setting. So yeah, there's a couple like pictures that don't quite align right and things like that. It looks like the proportions were maybe distorted a little bit graphically for purpose of the production. But other than that, I do think aesthetically it fits right in for this time period, what you're expecting within this setting.
There are historical games that look old, and this isn't one of them. This is one that looks nicer.
It looks nice. It's fittingly nice. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. It's not my style, but, I also don't have a personal ancestors in this area, kind of thing. But I think it's very, very fitting. Yes, those are my two biggest things that I really came away from, was just the thematic integration and then the characters, how personal it feels. But yet it is such a puzzle still. You can't help but feel the tension of this theme as you're playing, and like, oh, can we sacrifice the safe house? No, we can't. Hold on. That balance of your goal and what you're trying to do, and when is it okay to run in with the police and have that interaction and have to deal with that halt card, versus when do you bunker down and you just have to hide and reestablish your alibi, or boost up that morale, whatever it is. There's a lot of different things to balance on here, which really leads to a good tension and a good decision space of when do you pursue your goals versus when do you just kind of take care of your manpower. So great balance in that.
This is one of those games that you speak about both mechanically and thematically at the same time, which impresses me, because what you're talking about are both thematically what you're doing, but also mechanically how you play the game. And I think that's a great sign, as opposed to, and I'm just going to throw out like Eldritch Horror as an example. You're like, I'm going to get some boat tickets.
Right.
Like I'm speaking about this very mechanical, for such a thematic game.
Right.
It's a lot of just kind of like, get some things ready, okay, then I'll roll the dice later.
Right.
This is not that, and which I do love, right? I love that as you're playing those action cards, they represent your characters so well, to the point where when you just stop and think about them for a little bit, you're like, wow, that's so clever. I'm playing the character who is a pregnant woman. And so, therefore, my movement is slower. I can do normal movement, right? I can just walk around. But I can, play into it. I can lean into the woof, woof. And, therefore, I won't get stopped by the guards as easily.
Right.
And I find that both, hilarious and funny, right? And you're smuggling goods. But also, it just, like you said, it lends itself to being explained very easily for a game that does have quite a bit of rules to it.
Right. I think one of my favorite moments, you talk about the pregnant woman and the movement being affected, I think one of my favorite moments is a game we played together where when we had that realization that we had to get a baby stroller over to another location, to a safe house, then to its final destination.
We realized
contraband, yeah. And so we learned, or one of the mechanisms of it is if if you're playing a male character and they move that stroller, then they lose alibi. Because it's like, hold on, wait, during this time period, why is that guy pushing the stroller? But it doesn't affect the women, and vice versa. So I just think that was, again, just so fitting for the time period and what really was happening.
Right.
I also love, I can't say enough how impressed I was with the mechanism of the Ozo actions.
Yes.
With the higher the morale is, the extra actions you get, because everyone's invested and they're pumped up. And so it doesn't feel as punishing as that morale goes down, but it does feel more like dragging, like we can't quite get everything going, which you find your own morale going up and down as that track goes up. You get it up, wow, we're going to have 5 extra actions between us next turn. That's great. We can do this, and I can do that, and bam, and boom. But then as those guards come down and start taking down that morale, you truly feel that. You're like, oh, what can we cut out? What can we do different? And I just love how that track alone really sets the tempo of the game, like the emotional tempo of the game. That's so impressive. And just such a unique way to give you those extra actions to kind of boost and bolster your turns.
Emotional tempo is fantastic wording, because it really is such a highlight when you have 3, 4, 5 free actions to say, hey, you're in the middle of your turn, you finish that card, but let me take one of the free actions, jump over here, then you can use the rest of your card to grab these things, come over here, spend the last free action to complete this objective we're working on. And it's just so exciting that the game gives you more flexibility as you're working at keeping up that morale.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of games that are like, don't let morale get to 0.
Right.
Okay.
Fine.
But this one ties excitement and free actions into that so smoothly and so well.
Right. It's not all or nothing. It's not like, yeah, be within this range. It's like, no, hey, look, keep your guys going. It pays back, in full. So I really, really like that.
Now, the main driver of completing the objectives is typically kind of a pick up and deliver, right? Go use these action spaces, get goods, move around, and drop them off. That part to me is good. It's not as like bombastic and exciting as, get some weapons and chuck some dice and see if you cause some explosions. But that's really not what this game is. This game is about that passive, not passive, but the nonviolent resistance.
Yes, yeah.
And so go into that expecting that you're not blowing up bridges, releasing the dams and stuff. But what you're doing is still, it feels so sneaky, and you're not in a position of power, and that's the whole purpose of this game, is teaching you what that experience is to be oppressed over.
Right. It's definitely a game of balance, right? And I think that's evident in just the character development in the game. And by that, I mean there is none. You start the game with 3 cards, and that is your character and your personality and your abilities and what you bring to the resistance here. And that's all you have to offer for the whole game. Yeah. Outside of going out and gathering these resources and contraband and moving stuff around. And so it really is a matter of balancing this party and the needs and the goals and that kind of stuff more than I'm going to gear up and, oh man, now I got my machete. And it's not that game. It's this, like you said, that slow, peaceful resistance more than it is this overhaul revolution.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, but that being said, that does lead to one of my negatives of the game, is I can find it a little long and repetitious. If it is just a little bit of, okay, get these resources, take them over there, can you get this? The actual actions of the goals can feel a little repetitious.
Okay.
That being said, I know that Marcel is working on some short scenarios, which we had the opportunity of playing, and that did help with the time-wise. It really kind of brought it into where I would want it to be, which is about an hour and a half game.
Because the full game, I would say, is, especially with early games, going to be closer to 3 hours.
Right, and that's a little bit, at 3 hours, I don't think the game is repetitious. I think at that length, it becomes repetitious.
Okay.
That being said, as you're playing that long, you do get to utilize some of the, the locations better, because in the shorter games, I played 2 games of the shorter variants, and in neither of those did I ever use one of the locations. Didn't have a need to, it was a little bit shorter, it just, for whatever reason, that was not part of the game.
Right.
And so, sorry, go ahead. So you're kind of missing that, is all I was going to say.
And that part is the endurance feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I think that this game should be long. I say that about almost very few games, right? I think that the short variant is great. But I think that this game benefits from its length in that you feel that endurance wearing on you as your characters, as well as you as the gamer.
Yeah.
And it never becomes too drastic. It's not that. I mean, it's investment of a game. That being said, you start to feel your alibi really running low, and so you have to use these location actions that you don't have to in the short game to, like, oof, I got to move out that. I can't get caught, right?
Yeah.
And so you feel more of that pressure, and it really just. This is, for me, an emotional game, as well as it is mechanically solid. I love so much about the mechanisms, but I feel, and we haven't even talked about my favorite mechanism in the game, are those halt cards. When you move along a road that has the guards and you reveal that halt card, this is, to me, is everything that's amazing about the Crossroads games like Dead of Winter.
Yeah.
But also, you combine that with, it's not zombie apocalypse story. It's not fun fantasy story. These are real people, and these are the real impossible decisions that they had to make in these moments.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good way to put it. That's really good wording, is this becomes an emotional experience in those longer. You really do, it goes more into an experience and less of a game with that full scenario. If you're playing for the full 3 hours, you're getting a full Dutch resistance experience. Is kind of what it feels like. Whereas if you're playing a shorter variant, it does kind of edge closer to I played a game. You know, you're not feeling it as much. And for me personally, I want a little bit more of that middle ground somewhere. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to need an emotional break after I play a game necessarily.
Sure.
You know, it's a great experience and I'm glad I've had that. But as far as repetition and coming back to this game over and over again, I'm probably leaning more towards those shorter variants, keeping it a little bit lighter.
So we've spoken a lot. The shortcomings, the great parts of this. How would you come down score-wise on this?
Yeah, I'm going to come down at 8.5 on it. I think this is a truly excellent game. I think it's really impressive. Taking out of the equation first-time designer, first-time publisher here, I just think the game itself is incredibly impressive. Add those things back in, and I'm just over the moon with what this has accomplished. I think the fact that it is so thematically integrated is probably the most thematically integrated game that I've ever played. It's one of the few that just really sells you on that theme to where you want to know more, and everything you want to know more about is right here in the box as well. But it doesn't seem preachy, it doesn't seem in your face, it doesn't feel like I'm taking a history class. It's almost like a movie in a box, but it's not movie, it's a real life. You know, it's history in a box here, and such a great package. That being said, I do think it is a pretty heavy experience as you play into that, to where it kind of takes it out of that game category a little bit too much, which brings it down to that 8.5 for me. But with the shorter variants being, you know, once they become official, I know that they haven't been released yet, but once they become official, I do think that will elevate that experience as well, so that you can really understand and appreciate the mechanisms that are in this that make it such a great game.
And for me, I'm coming in at a 9. The difference between an 8.5 up to a 9 is, it's funny because it's a half a point, but Thomas said this before, it means a lot. It takes a lot for me to really bump up to that extra step there, because not only is this a solid game mechanically, not only do I love the history behind it, but it's a game that makes me feel for these people, for the people that really went through this. I enjoy history a lot, and I enjoy learning history, and sometimes it is this is great facts that I've learned kind of experience, and other times it's an emotional gut punch. And that's what this game does. When you flip over one of those halt cards and it says, for example, there's a boy running up to you scared. Do you help him hide at the risk of your own safety, or do you sell him out?
Right.
Because it'll gain favor in the eyes of the occupation Nazi forces, and then you can more easily continue your own operations. And you think, I don't like making that choice.
Right. In a dungeon, yeah, sure, no, forget the kid. You know what I mean? I'm going to grab the treasure and I'm going to run out. You know, forget that goblin. Like, that's very different. That's not what this is at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for a game to make me truly feel emotional, and even just talking about this, it does something that almost no other game has done for me before. So it's fantastic. If you are looking for that, play that longer experience, dive into those cards, read your characters. If you want more of that, just like a really good cooperative game, then play the shorter variants and stuff as they come out. But I can't say enough good about this game. So Dutch Resistance, Orange Shell Overcome, getting a seal of excellence from us here at the Dice Tower.
Absolutely. Well deserved.
So thanks for coming out to another review. My name's Chris Yee.
I'm Camilla.
And have fun gaming.